So I'm going to start today's lecture. Today's lecture is again a part of your MELS 202 Victorian paper. And today we are going to continue with Unit 3. Okay, there might have been a slight mistake in the previous video lecture, previous couple of video lectures, the set of 2 video lectures on the subjection of woman. I might have written the unit to be 2 there, but actually the unit is 3. Non-fiction prose is unit 3 of your MELS 202 paper, and we are going to continue with that unit 3, and we are going to move from John Stuart Mill's The Subjection of Woman to Matthew Arnold's Culture and Anarchy. Again, this is going to be uh, a group of multiple lectures, again a set of lectures, not a single lecture, because these things are heavy intellectual things and you need to understand slowly and steadily. So first, in this lecture, I'm going to, just as has been the pattern of my explanation of things, I will give you certain background information about the text and about Matthew Arnold himself, so that you understand the text and you understand the philosophies by which the text is written, or the major influences, philosophical and psychological influences on the text. So, Culture and Anarchy is written by a person called Matthew Arnold, who's not only an English, who's not only an English poet. Uh, he's quite a popular poem. The poem Dover Beach is in quite many, almost all undergraduate or postgraduate syllabuses. His poem Rugby Chapel is in many postgraduate syllabuses. So Matthew Arnold is a very important personality when it comes to Victorian literature, and there are reasons why. Because Matthew Arnold is not exactly adhering to the philosophies of Victorian literature. Now, when I was explaining Victorian age, the backdrop of the Victorian age, or even in the live class that we had, I explained how the Victorian age moved away from faith towards science, towards scientific discoveries, and how there was a religion, how there was a skeptical religious, how there was a religious, sorry, how there was skepticism in the religious beliefs of the Victorian age. Matthew Arnold is going against this against this. Matthew Arnold is not writing his art, is not writing his art in an art for art's sake manner. The main artistic movement that happened in the Victorian age was the aesthetic movement, which propagated that, well, art for art's sake. You write a poem, a novel, you draw a painting, you make a music composition, well, because it's beautiful and you want to do it and it gives you pleasure. That's it. Nothing of the sort that the poem should have something moralistic about it, or the painting should have a moral, or the music should be related to some moral, or telling the story of some great religious happening. No. Matthew Arnold did not go towards the art for art's sake dictum, so as to say. Matthew Arnold veered away from the art, moved away from the art for art's sake, and kept on believing and emphasizing the fact that art has to be moralistic. And it is this influence or philosophy that he had that made him popular, not only as a poet but also as a cultural critic. Now, who is a cultural critic? A cultural critic is a person who critiques the society and the culture that is there in the society. So he's almost uh, he's almost like a grandfather figure to society, who looks down at society and points out what its problems are, points out what its strengths are, and points out what it must do to become better. So the moral quality of Matthew Arnold's art cannot be neglected, and that is what makes him very important. Matthew Arnold has been characterized as a sage writer, a type of writer who chastises and instructs the reader on contemporary social issues. Exactly the point that I was telling you. So he's not writing his art uh, just for the sake of pleasure. He's writing his art so as to inform his society, so as to recommend his society, so as to uh, give them an idea of how to uh, amend themselves. Then the third and the fourth, third point is not very important. Well, in this case, it's just for details. A history of when he became a literary critic, how he's just the starting of Arnold as a critic. Arnold's work as a literary critic began in 1853 with the preface to the poems. This is the name of the essay. In it, he admitted that to explain his extreme act of self-censorship in excluding dramatic poets like Empedocles on Etna, with its emphasis on the importance of the subject in poetry, on clearness of argument, rigors of development, simplicity of style learned from the Greeks, and in the strong imprint of Goethe and Wordsworth, may observe nearly in essential. It's unimportant. It's again the fact is uh, he's idealizing the classical people. He's idealizing the classics. He's idealizing the romantics like Wordsworth. He's idealizing uh, the German romantic Goethe, the Greeks. So yeah, see, I have given this here just to again show the fact to you that he's not adhering to art for art's sake. Absolutely not. He was led on from literary criticism to more general critique of the spirit of his age. Between 1863 and 1869, he wrote Culture and Anarchy, famous for the term he popularized for the middle class, the middle class of the English Victorian era, called the Philistines. Now, what are the Philistines? We'll go into it in details later. So, from literary criticism, that is criticism of literature, poetry, novels, art, he moves on to social and cultural criticism, where he becomes the critic of the entire spirit of the age. Now, Matthew Arnold was not a great proponent of the art for art's sake, or he did not, uh, or the veering away of the Victorian sentiment from religion to a rejection of religion greatly pained Matthew Arnold, and Matthew Arnold is time and again in his poems, his essays, trying to re-establish that religious sense in literature. Now we are going to move forward. Beyond this about Matthew Arnold, I don't think you require to know any more details. So we are moving into, well, an introduction of the text, which is Culture and Anarchy. As you see, this is the original version. This is an image of the original pamphlet, an essay on political and social criticism by Matthew Arnold, London, Smith Elder and Company, Waterloo Place, 1867. 1869. Uh, so, what, as you can understand by the name, see, so what are the ideas that the word culture and anarchy give? The word culture gives you the idea of a certain kind of uh, order, and anarchy gives you the idea of a certain kind of disorder. So this is what Matthew Arnold is critiquing. He's bringing forward in front of us in his essay how culture and anarchy, so how order and disorder are affecting the Victorian society, and how and what should be done, what is actually required to progress in this society. How are we to create order out of anarchy, which is disorder? So do we create culture out of anarchy? Because anarchy is going to the ruin. Anarchy will lead to the ruin of civilization. Now, the greatest what exactly he means by anarchy is something that we must understand. If you are again go back to our Victorian introduction class, you will remember that I gave you a list of laws where I said the most important was the Chartist movement, the first Reform Bill, and the second Reform Bill. And why were they important? They were important because they gave rights. They gave rights to the male, only the male, not the female. We are going into We won't be again going into the feminist politics as of now. So it is so people are getting rights. First, all the male tenants of the cities get rights in the first reform bill, and then all men across the British Isles, whether in cities or in villages, get their rights in the second reform bill. So, and what do we call the process of giving rights? Democracy. Democracy gives people rights. And so democracy was the new buzzword, the new political, cultural, social buzzword. And Matthew Arnold saw that in the creation of democracy, in the giving away of rights to everyone, he felt that society would transcend into a state of anarchy, where everyone would want what he or she as an individual would desire for, not what society collectively desires. And this is the main idea behind this essay, Culture and Anarchy. So Matthew Arnold is looking at society as a whole, as a one complete substance, and he sees democracy, which gives rights to everyone, as something that is going to start, something that is going to uh, how may I put it? How should I put it better? Uh, as the embers for anarchy, as he sees society as a collection of hay and straw, and he considers democracy to be the fire embers which are being thrown onto the society, which is hay. And the moment the embers catch the hay, it is going to burn everything up. So again, a very problematic idea that Matthew Arnold has. We have always considered democracy to be an ideal of freedom. But Matthew Arnold is not looking at it in this manner. He's looking at democracy as an idea of anarchy. What he believes is that society should be seen as a whole and should be governed by a general set of rules and regulations, which he calls culture. These general set of rules and regulations do not vary from people to people. Everyone in society must listen, adopt, and adhere and abide by those rules. So hence I can make you understand culture and anarchy. So when you're giving rights to everyone, there people will start objecting to that culture. And when the objection to the culture starts, there is anarchy. Because according to Matthew Arnold, it is culture that holds and binds society together as a whole. In it, Arnold contrasts culture, which he defines as a study of perfection, with anarchy, the prevalent mood of England's then new democracy, which lacks standards as a sense of direction. So democracy is something new. England was an autocracy where the king was the head, the queen was the head, of king or queen was the head of the state. Now it has become a democracy, but as every new thing, there is no clear path or idea behind it. People are confused as to what to do and what not to do. It has not been perfected. And so in such situations, Matthew Arnold tells us or writes in the essay that this is going to lead to anarchy. And so the only way that to stop anarchy is to bind everyone by one law, one rule, one objective of society called culture. Arnold saw in the idea of the state and not in the idea of one class of society the true organ and repository of the nation's best collective self. So, well, with democracy, with the industrial revolution, there emerged a great class consciousness. There was a creation of the middle class, with voting rights. Again, this class consciousness got even more validated. But then Matthew Arnold again saw this creation of class consciousness as problematic, because he felt that the class consciousness will only make them aware, or it will only make them think of their own class, not society as a whole. And so Arnold gives the idea, or is of the idea, that there can be only one unifying idea of society, which is the state, which is the nation itself, the state itself. And it is only when societies, which consist all forms of classes, are bound together, held together by the state, that society would be in its best self. And that is why Matthew Arnold is against individual class consciousness, because he feels that it is going to make those classes selfish and not look at society as a whole. It is written with an inward prose, a serene detachment, and an infusion of subtle humor that makes it a masterpiece of ridicule as well as searching analysis of Victorian society. It is again inward poise, because Matthew Arnold is going inward poise, serene detachment, and infusion of subtle humor. Well, Matthew Arnold is going away, he's moving away from the dominant ideologies of the Victorian era. So he's writing it from by detaching himself from the entire society. So he's not get the influences of this essay are not coming from society as a whole. It is coming from his own ideologies and psychologies and his own influences, his cultural, social, and political influences. A serene detachment. His detachment means to be away, and Matthew Arnold is kind of peacefully away from the mainstream of the Victorian society. He has detached himself from the mainstream of the Victorian society, which is moving away from religion, which is objecting to religion, which is uh, looking at art for the sake of pleasure and beauty. He's moving away from all these things. And so, in itself, this book is a masterpiece of ridicule as well as a searching analysis of Victorian society. So, in, it is happening in two ways. So, Matthew Arnold is uh, analyzing the Victorian society and what he feels is wrong with the Victorian society. But we as readers who know what the mainstream ideas of Victorian ideologies were, this book almost comes to the point of being ridiculed, because Matthew Arnold is moving away from everything. Matthew Arnold is telling us that art should be moralistic in nature, it should have a moral. Matthew Arnold is moving away from class consciousness, says no, creation of individual classes is not a very good thing. The classes should not have any individuality, they should be bound by the state. So it is almost like the readers will ridicule this essay, while will ridicule Matthew Arnold's philosophies while they are reading this essay. But we should not only ridicule, we should also remember that this essay gives us deep insights into Victorian society and what perhaps was the ills of the Victorian society. Okay, I am not going to go into uh, well, okay, let us bring it further a little bit, and then I'm going to stop this. The major idea we are going to go through this again in the next lecture, next part 2 of the lecture. I'm just going to go on over it in a jiffy, just so that you get an overview idea. So Matthew Arnold divides, a major idea of this book is Matthew Arnold's division of British Victorian society into three classes: the barbarians, the Philistines, and the populace. By barbarians, Matthew Arnold denotes the upper class, with their lofty spirit of serenity and distinguished manners and their inaccessibility of ideas. The upper class, the lords, the dukes, who have always been powered, and now with the creation of class consciousness, democracy, they are threatened by a loss of their power, but they do not want to lose that power. They're too individualized, too individualistic, selfish, even perhaps. Only they are concerned with themselves and their hold on power, and uh, as a result, they do not want to change with the change in the age. And he calls them barbarians. Barbarians are the people who destroy civilization. The Huns, the Goths, Attila the Hun, we've heard in history. The Sengoths, the Goths. So he calls them barbarians. Why are we calling them barbarians? Because they vandalize, where they're vandalizing the fabric of society altogether. They think their ideas are lofty. They have distinguished manners, how to wear a cloth, how to speak in public, how to hold the fork and the knife. But this has done nothing but to alienate them further from society. I'm coming to Philistine, but I'll explain the populace first. Populace are the working class, the absolute working class, perhaps the lowest rung of the society, the working class, who are still raw and blind. So education has not quite seeped into it, and the condition that they live their life is not congenial for them to uh, to just embrace or indulge in, all forms of political and social and cultural studies and debates, because the main issue about them is, well, bringing food to the table 2 times a day. They are still raw and blind. And so Matthew Arnold again says that the populace uh, is not destroying the society like the barbarians, but the populace have no input into creating the culture of a society. uh, they have no role in the creation of a culture in the society. Matthew Arnold says the most important part of the society is the middle class, the Philistines, the stronghold of religious nonconformity with plenty of energy and moral and morality, but insufficient sweetness and light. He feels that this middle class, who now has money and can look at other indulgences than just looking at putting food on the table, who have been affected by education, who have an individuality and can look and critique society. He calls them Philistines, and he believes that it is these Philistines who will really create the culture of a society. And so it is absolutely essential to educate and humanize the Philistines. He says that these Philistines are very crude in their nature, being factory owners, working in the factories, uh, handling money. They are not intellectual beings, they are physical beings. And Matthew Arnold is of the opinion that this middle class, which he calls Philistine, should be educated and humanized if there has to be a creation of a singular binding culture in the society that is going to uh, oust anarchy. So I'm not going into, again, these are the chapter divisions. Sweetness of light, sweetness and light is the first chapter. I'm not going into that in this part of the lecture. I hope you've understood. I'm finishing my lecture to here. If you have any ideas, feel free to contact me.